the business news now. And Kate, you've been looking at the economic impact of further Western sanctions still in the pipeline against Russia.
Hi, Laura. Yeah, diplomats meeting at that G7 summit in The Hague say they're coming increasingly closer to a deal to intensify sanctions against Moscow. Those sanctions would likely focus on key sectors of the Russian economy. U.S. sanctions have already gone further than EU ones, singling out key businessmen and a major Russian bank. But Europe does have closer economic ties to Russia than the United States does. As you should be able to see in a graph that we'll pull up in a moment, the EU does 10 times as much trade with Russia as the United States and is the biggest customer for Russian oil and gas. Some European businessmen say they fear that they would be the ones on the losing end of more sanctions.
Russia is our main client. If it's calling for tenders and purchases, that's good news for us. As long as our offers are competitive, we're in business. If Russia isn't buying, then we're not doing so well.
In another development, as that crisis continues, France's biggest bank, BNP Paribas, says that it will reduce its staff in Ukraine by 1,600 in the coming year. That amounts to some 20% of its workforce there. BNP has already been trying to reduce exposure to the instability in the region, closing 84 of its local branches last year. Now, we haven't had a lot of positive news about the French economy lately, but new data shows the private sector here in France has been growing at its fastest pace in 2.5 years this month. Preliminary readings of the Purchasing Managers Index hit 51.6 in March. That's up from just 47.9 in February and above the 50 benchmark that indicates growth. Overall European growth slowed slightly to 53.2, but it still marks the 9th month of expansion here in the Eurozone. German manufacturing slowing down a little bit, but still quite strong. There have been some worries about Chinese manufacturing as activity contracted there to an 8-month low. And in the US, the PMI fell from a nearly 4-month high, down nearly 2 points to 55.5, still in growth territory there in the United States. Now, all that data has done little to boost the markets. We saw red across the board here in Europe. Germany's DAX closing down over 1.5%. The MICEX in Moscow also sliding as Western powers discuss those possible sanctions. That negative trend has been reaching across to Wall Street as well. The Nasdaq is seeing its worst trading day in some 7 weeks. Shares are weighed down by heavy losses in the biotech industry. And investors around the world are really feeling anxious about that apparent slowdown in China, and especially the ongoing turmoil in Crimea. Now, a jury in New York has just convicted 5 former employees of Bernie Madoff of helping him to carry out his Ponzi scheme. The 5 were found guilty of charges including falsifying records, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Madoff was convicted in 2009 and sentenced to 150 years in prison for running a massive fraud scheme that's thought to have lost his clients some $20 billion worth of investments. And finally, which is more precious for you, water or beer? It turns out you can't have one without the other. At least that's the case for some brewers in the western United States who've been experiencing a drought. The dry spell is forcing many of them to come up with more creative solutions, as Mariam Saab reports.
The ultimate thirst quencher on a hot day, a tall order of beer. But what happens when that hot day turns into an epic dry spell? In a matter of months, parts of California could be out of water. And no water means no beer. It can take up to 7 litres of water for every litre of beer produced. With stakes high and water levels at an all-time low, local brewery Beer Republic have a secret weapon, EcoVolt. They've seen the water-to-beer ratio drop since instituting the world's first bioelectric water treatment system, bringing new meaning to the old adage, waste not, want not.
This is electrically active microbes that quickly treat wastewater and generate really high-quality gas. We take that gas and we can put it in a boiler to offset natural gas costs, or we can put it in a cogeneration system to generate electricity and heat.
This biogas is enough to generate up to half of the brewery's electricity needs and over 20% of its heat. Encouraged by these results, others around the drought-ridden Sunshine State are starting to follow suit.
I do think it's going to be a trend, especially in places like California or Arizona that are very water stressed. This is going to be a really good solution.
Although health officials say the recycled water is safe enough to drink, it's still not being used to make the actual beer, mostly cleaning kegs and bottles. But if customers are willing to embrace the move, that could soon change, and beers made of recycled water could be the way of the future.
Some people will do anything to get a pint, it seems. That's all the business news for now. I'll be back with more in the next hour. For now, it's back to you, Laura.
Thanks very much, Kate. Kate Moody there with the business. Well, we're going to find out what's got people clicking, sharing, liking, and all the rest of it. Like now, it's web news.